You know.
You gotta start learning that Hmong dance, bro. I'm telling you, man. Wear Hmong clothes to work. Can you imagine doing that, dude? Dude, this dude looks like a freaking dot. Like, dude, the only... Speaking of Hmong clothes...
They'd be like, dude, you trying too hard, man. You're too much.
Yo, we get it, man. You're Hmong, man. Go home and change, bro.
I know. You ain't gonna influence anybody with those clothes. You'll turn some heads, man. You ain't gonna influence anybody with those clothes.
Oh, shoot.
It's like... What's good? What's good? What's good? Welcome to the Bamboo Ceiling Podcast this week. This week, we want to talk about just your journey of being Hmong and how proud you are. Or if you're not proud of yourself, where are you at on that journey? You know, Hmong people have never had land, never had a country. And so being Hmong, sometimes we can struggle and wrestle with, you know, being proud of who we are. And so we just kind of want to deconstruct that this week and go from there. You know, how proud are you of being Hmong?
So before we do that, so Apple, can you give us like a definition of proud?
Yeah, I guess my definition would be not so much like where you like chant and where you're like our race is better than yours, yeah. Right? But it's more of like finding a self-esteem or like a self-love in like who you are, where you come from, right? Yeah. And I know a lot of us, at least for me, growing up, got made fun of because you were Asian, right? And just kind of healing through that, or if you ever have healed through that. Yeah, right. So
yeah, I think how I see it as what you're saying is owning your cultural roots.
Yeah.
Embracing your cultural roots.
Right.
And not be afraid or ashamed or embarrassed of you know, who you are, where you come from, what kind of food you eat, how you act towards things, and how you look like when it may be very countercultural towards things. And so embracing your cultural roots. Where are you guys at with that?
So for me, like my journey, right? So I want to say growing up in a small town, it's a smaller community. So I felt like we were more tight-knit and more involved. So growing up, I got to experience a lot of like events, you know, gathering and being around the OGs and seeing, you know, the relationships between the two, like the elders and like the young bucks. And so I felt like that's something that I hold like dear to me. But then at the same time, I will admit that I was slightly like embarrassed to be Hmong too, because, you know, obviously our parents' generation, they didn't look the part. They didn't, you know what I'm saying? When you see your white friends, their parents, right? They're more educated. They dress better. You know, they don't look as fobby. And then, like, you know, I was always ashamed of like being seen at the store with my parents, and I'm ashamed to admit that now, right? Because like I should be prideful in that. But so after leaving like the little town that I grew up in and then moving up to the cities, I realized that that's something I miss a lot. Not having those events to go to, not being around the elders and not hearing like all their stories, whether it be gossips or like, you know, sometimes just listening to the OGs tell like their war stories, right? Like that thing just like, I don't know, they just fascinate me, you know. And so so I've grown to like it, you know.
Did your elders or your parents wear button-up shirts and slacks everywhere? My parents don't do that every day.
They still do, right?
It's like you go out to hang out or go work out. It's button-up.
Dude, I see. Like one time I went to Como Zoo, right, and I saw this Hmong OG in the suit, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, this dude is rocking it, man. But like to the zoo, that's a little extreme. But
to their mind, that's social, like you know, dressing appropriately for social gathering
for the situation.
Back in the days, that's what they did.
But probably not anymore. You know, not when it's like 90 degrees out. You know,
4th of July.
Yeah, that's true. But that's one thing I miss. And I've learned to. I know that that's something that's going to die off as like the generations, you know, progress and transcend. Like once all the OGs like die off, we won't be doing that as much, and I'll miss that. You know, how about you guys?
I hated being Hmong.
You hated being Hmong?
Yeah, I grew up for whatever reason, we grew up in cities that didn't have, well, at the time didn't have a lot of Hmong people, at least in the area, right? Even though, like, from kindergarten, it was St. Paul, but it was like on White Bear, and before White Bear had Hmong people. So
Really?
on the east
That's
side.
Hmong Town.
Yeah, now it's Hmong Town. But then there was none, and then of course we moved to Wisconsin, and then we lived in La Crosse, and there was no Hmong.
You lived in La Crosse?
Yeah, I lived in La Crosse for like 2 years. There was like no Hmong people
At the time?
Yeah, at the time.
It's there's a lot of Hmong folks there now.
Now,
Okay.
yeah, it was like 80. I must have been
80 family? What? 80 what?
I was at least a third grader.
So in the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s. Yeah, so there wasn't any Hmong people.
Dang.
Except for like my cousins that lived down the street from us.
Right.
And other than that, no Hmong people. So I grew up kind of just being like what you said, Doug, being embarrassed of my parents, having to translate, right?
Oh, yep.
Having people get my name wrong, right? Because my Hmong name is Dao, right?
Yeah.
And so every which way, right? Doug, Dave, Dua, like
they butcher your name every time.
right? Every which way, and I just remember being really embarrassed, because I remember spending my whole life trying to like rewire myself so I could fit in with my white friends, and so I had mostly white friends until about middle school, and because we moved back into the cities, and so when we moved back into cities, I met my Hmong friends, right? And then you start to identify with them a little bit. And I just remember, like, with my Hmong friends, it's so weird. Like, and even like through high school, there's certain things they don't get, right? Like the Jackass movies. Sometimes I find them funny, right? My
But your
Hmong
Hmong friends didn't.
they don't. Like, they do not
Not
find
their
them.
type of humor.
Yeah, it's not their type of humor. But like that's the rewiring, right?
Right.
And like I think from middle school, it's weird because in middle school, then I started to identify more with Hmong people, and I dropped my white friends. I don't know why. Like, why did it have to be white?
One or the
One or
other,
the
right?
other.
One or the
You know what
other,
I'm
yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so growing through, and of course I hated the cultural stuff. I hated that you had to speak Hmong proper, or else they looked down on you. I hated how Hmong culture.
You weren't Hmong enough then.
Yeah, I wasn't, right, and I wasn't Hmong enough to be accepted by Hmong people too, right, and so I hated all that. But it's weird, right? In doing that, I finally figured out why I dropped my white friends, right? It's because of me. It was my fault, right? Because I was battling between the two, right? And I didn't know how to be a Hmong American, and that's why I dropped them.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to work that in the gray area, right?
Right.
I didn't know how to work that out in myself, and so I think that's what I'm currently still doing right now, right? Learning to be that, like, Hmong American. And once I realized that is being Hmong, right? Hmong American, then I started to accept it.
Yeah.
I think we as millennials can embrace the insecurity of being a Twinkie or a banana,
Right.
identifying being Hmong on the outside, but American
On the inside.
and on the inside. And how do we, allow that Hmong to be in that American space as well?
Yeah.
Because we are unique. We are foreign people in a different land, growing up in a foreign to bicultural, atmosphere or environments. And so I think that's crazy. I think to your point though, I think for me, I have privilege. So I have privilege.
Explain that privilege to us.
So I've gotten the privilege to move around the States a lot. So we
True.
got to meet grow up in different cultures. Hung out with, went to church with Hmong folks, but went to school with a lot of different other people, and it's just not Minnesota, California, it's all these other states as well. But in that, I think one thing when we moved up to Minnesota here is not being part of the bigger Hmong community, I actually enjoy owning the celebrations and going to the celebrations and and taking pride in, just being Hmong in that. And even though inside there was the insecurity of me feeling like I'm not Hmong enough, like I felt like, going to these celebrations brought me back to my cultural roots, then began to like, kind of like, sow in some pride into me, I think. But to transition from that, like, I feel like I've been on that journey of being proud of being Hmong, right? And now I'm beginning to own that. But it wasn't until I work at a place where I'm the only Asian or Hmong person, at my place. And being kind of stripped away from your community, you begin to see things from a different light, and you enjoy more of the things that you grew up with. The hospitality of the culture, the community of the, the culture, the warmth, and just, you begin to see things from a different light and allow more grace in the community. And in that being stripped away from the community, I feel that has helped me to own more of my Hmongness and be like, no, like, this is who I am, and I'm the only person that looks like me and values my own value. And if I don't value them, who will? And being stripped away from the community as a whole, I'm beginning to value myself in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's a part of the reason why it took me so long to accept my Hmongness.
Yeah.
Because I've always been, ever since I met Hmong people, right? I've always been around a ton of Hmong people now, right? And so I remember the story. We went up to Michigan to visit some of my cousins in Pontiac, right? And I was talking to one of my girl cousins, and she was just like, "Dang, you Minnesotans, you guys don't show love to anyone." And I was like, "Shoot!" And she was just like, "Cause when we went up there, like, it was like hospitality central, right? Like, every cousin wants you to sleep over at the house. Every cousin is throwing a dinner for you, right?" And so I was thinking to myself, I was like, dang, you're right. But it's because I was telling her, hey, it's because we see Hmong people every single day, And like, once they see a new Hmong person, they're like, oh my gosh, like a new person, And we see Hmong people every single day. So I think I've taken Hmong
for
culture
granted.
For granted,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So you and I, we're kind of like on the same boat in terms of like having been away from like the community ish. Because aside from going to church, I'm barely around anyone.
Yeah.
And my cousins every now and then, but we don't have like this group of like, how you have these clans, like they always have these special clan picnics, and I'm never around that type of atmosphere, right? So for the people like you and I that really want to come back to their roots, right? To wanting to, if we want to come back to our community, like what does it look like for us, right? Like guys like us it's not a matter of just seeing Hmong people at like a park and going, hey, I'm Hmong too, can I play with you guys? Right?
Can I join y'all?
Yeah, because it's gonna be challenging because you've left the scene for so long, and how do you get back into the scene?
I really think it's not external, it's internal.
Okay.
Where everything is all about owning what's inside of you and not trying to force things that are, hey, force a relationship that's not there, right?
Yeah.
Just because I see you, you see me. Of course, when I see a Hmong person, there's an automatic relation going on, right? Like you can see them, you know them, right? You can feel them. And so that, it has nothing to do with forcing that, because you can feel that. You can feel the community regardless of you knowing them individually. But I think it's more of being internal, like me owning up to what's insecure and embarrassing for me. And that's my Hmongness, where I'm like, honestly, I can speak Hmong, I can't write it, but I can read it. But that now I'm beginning to be like, that's enough. I don't have to be one to actually, even though I do want to write, I've learned that I'm enough in my experiences as I do keep the traits and qualities that my parents taught me, and let it be known that that's enough for me.
Yeah, because I feel like the struggle is that I think everybody defines Hmongness completely different from each other, and obviously everyone grows up differently too. So I think the struggle will always be, because you're to some, regardless of how And it goes back to your point. It doesn't really matter what people think about you in terms of like where you're at with Hmongness, as long as you're happy with where you're at, right? Because we all define Hmongness differently. So you're obviously not going to be enough for some, or you might be too much for some too. So I mean, at the end of the day, as long as you are happy and content with who you are, and I think that's the key. Like you said, it's more internal.
Going back to your point, going back to what Abel was saying to his white friends and his Hmong friends, right? He was not enough for his Hmong friends, right?
Yeah.
But it was too much for his white friends. So,
too Hmong for us, yeah.
So that's a battle that's a factor you can never control.
Yeah.
And I think throughout life, that's one thing we can never control, right? And in that, we just have to own up what's internal inside and be like, at least I know I'm enough because this is my experience. And your Hmong friends didn't have your lacrosse or other experiences. Yeah. Right?
Right. No, they didn't.
And so and your white friends didn't have your Hmong experiences at home either. Yeah. And it's like, you're taking the best of both worlds and mixing it up to be you. And it's like, how do we be proud of just where we're at in this time,
Yeah, I kind of, to answer you, Doug, I was reading this article about Bruce Lee, and he said what he did was, because, he was almost like a superstar already in America, right? And so people thought he was too Asian in America, but then he would go back to China, and then, now you're whitewashed, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so what he said was, what he did was he just showcased what was beautiful about being Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why he did this. That's why he did martial arts, right? And he showcased that. Right. He showcased whatever he thought was beautiful about his culture, right? And same thing when he went to China, right? He would showcase
the American culture,
culture, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good starting point for us.
It is
to showcase what we think is beautiful about our culture.
So what are some tangible things we can showcase about our culture?
Hmong dance, anywhere you go, right? At your company, at your workplace, you got to start Hmong dancing. It seems like the one.
Start a Salavong circle or something. I don't think that's Hmong.
That's Laos and Thai, but regardless, no, that's right. Showcase,
Yeah, I think we could start like, how we always talk about hospitality, right?
Yeah.
And dude, like, we need to like live that, own that, especially with our other ethnicities, our white friends, our black friends, or whatever. Like, own that, Right. How can we do that with Hmong people, but not do that with white people? Like,
it's true.
So just to affirm that too, like, even though we don't do it all the time, I think it's ingrained in our culture, right? Because I had a couple years ago, I had a white friend that came here from the South, and he's from the South. But he came to some of our events and the wedding and stuff like that. Yeah. And, we had the family there and stuff. And he was like, dang, like, I really felt like, man, I was part of you guys when I was there. But we didn't try, right?
What was his name
Matt.
Again? Matt was a cool dude.
Yeah, he was a cool, he was, but it was just like, I don't think there was an effort there. It was just ingrained. So part of it, but to your extent, how do we accentuate or highlight that even more, right? Because that is something that's more natural. You
gotta start learning that Hmong dance, bro. I'm telling you, man. Wear Hmong clothes to work. Can you imagine doing that, dude? Dude, this dude looks like a freaking dot. Like, dude, the only speaking of Hmong clothes,
they'd be like, dude, you trying too hard, man. You're too much.
Yo, we get it, man. You're Hmong, man. Go home and change, bro.
I know. You ain't gonna influence anybody with those clothes. You'll turn some heads, man. You ain't gonna influence anybody with those clothes.
Oh, shoot.
It's like, man, stop trying, man. Be you. Be you. That's overcompensating for what you are inside, and so don't overcompensate for what you aren't inside. Be you in your own experience and own your Hmongness. And so
and to the audience, I hope this episode can help you deal with whatever struggles you're dealing with when it comes to identifying with your Hmongness. Don't take my advice. Don't start wearing Hmong clothes to work. But be happy with who you are, because at the end of the day, it's all about you, man. What makes you happy? What makes you content?
Yep. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode of The Bamboo Ceiling, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at #The Bamboo Ceiling. Until next time, use your voice.